Hello, everybody. Welcome to another Beyond Education Insight event. This time around, it's all about interview prep for HSBC. Guys, you know how we do. Put in your names, your LinkedIn's in the group chat. Let's connect. Let's get to know each other. We're not shy around here. So I'm gonna give you guys 2 minutes. Put your LinkedIn in the chat. You never know. Your next colleague is in this group. Is in this chat. So you never know. You never ever know. I'm gonna start us off first. Well, guys, please don't be shy. And if you know anyone that can benefit from this, tell them to sign up. They can still join in. They can still join in if they want to. Definitely. Wow. Finding my LinkedIn is actually hard. Wow. Thank you to whoever started that off. Mariam. Amazing. Okay, people are not airing me. I love this. Thank you guys. Um, we'll start in the next 1 minute. I think it's just around 6:05. Thank you so much for joining in as well, guys. We currently know that HSBC applications are currently live right now, so the place to be in is here, so you can get all the information to make sure that when you do get that offer, you're smashing that interview. And I've just put in my LinkedIn into the chat. I think we can start, Agolade. But yeah,
Perfect. Great.
welcome everyone. Welcome to the virtual insight event for HSBC interview prep. I am Demi. I am the founder associate here at Beyond Education. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening to join us today. Today we have a career coach. He's the expert in this field. So he will be leading today's session and letting you guys know all the things you need to smash that interview session. Please welcome Agwalade from FO Perspectives.
Hi, thank you, Demi. Lovely to meet you all. So I'll be running the session today. So I want to focus on everything interview. So let's get into it. I want to share my screen and we'll kick things off. Perfect. Let me know you guys can see it in full screen mode and then we'll get going. All good, Demi? Perfect. Great. So interview prep. So before we still get into it, a bit about who I am. So I'm Agbalade. I run FA Perspectives. So who are we? We're technically a talent extraction company, but also a career coaching company. What we do is we work with both employers, but also a lot of universities and students to support them with their applications, helping them sort of kickstart their careers. So that comes through like workshops such as these, job opportunities, etc. And we've got quite a big network now. So roughly 20K plus now across our platforms and our newsletters. So again, we sort of provide like advice, etc. Bit about our impacts. We want to sort of go straight into our workshop. So across our team, roughly 10 years experience now, I would say. Across the field. So myself, I used to work in asset management before sort of pivoting into strategy consulting. Did a few internships at university. I did 3 internships across asset management, insurance, and consulting. And then we've helped over 200 students in the last 4.5 years sort of land internships and grad schemes and the sort of companies below. So we've got a lot of experience in doing this essentially. But cool, great. Let's sort of get into it. So, boom, congrats. You've made it through to the interview stage. So you've done your CVs, you've applied, done the online assessments, potentially. You might have done your online interview potentially, and you're now through to the interview stage. So this is where I sort of say things start get to the sort of the narrow and when things sort of start to sort of heat up. So firstly, roughly only 2% of job applicants actually land interviews at internship and graduate scheme stage. So getting through this stage, firstly, well done. But now it's sort of like where you're up against the best of the best. And you need to sort of actually sort of stand out now in comparison to others even more. So how do you go about doing that? How would I actually go about now sort of standing out in comparison to the other 1%ers? Well, first thing first, it's interview prep structure. So when it comes to interview prep, the fundamental basis of any sort of interview prep that you do is your structuring of your interview prep. Because if you don't structure your interview prep correctly, you may firstly miss out gaps in what you should be preparing for. And more importantly, the quality of your prep will show through in your actual interview answers. Now, essentially, why I sort of have this sort of four quadrant rule when it comes to interview prep, which works across, in my eyes, most types of roles. So there's sort of four key buckets that you should be focusing on when it comes to your interview prep. First one I call is company research. So that's one of the arguably most important buckets for me. So that's everything around um, understanding what the company does, what is their strategy, what is their vision, how have they performed, have they won any sort of awards, what is their sort of culture and values, like why that company, why do you want to work there? So it's sourcing that as like motivational being covered. Next is STAR method. And this is STAR method, essentially read competencies. So you're like I could probably bet anyone everyone here £10 any interview you do, you're gonna get a competency question in there, probably multiple. That is most employers' main way of being able to sort of weed out whether or not who will be good for this role, who has the relevant transferable skills. Third one is CV storytelling, also really, really important and quite powerful when done correctly. This is your chance to sort of show the interviewer who you are. So usually this covers questions such as like, tell me about yourself or walk me through your CV. Those sort of questions. This is essentially what CV storytelling comes into. And the last part, which is also overlooked quite a lot, is preparing questions to ask them. It's always really important when it comes to any sort of interview you do, is you've got to have questions to ask them to sort of build that connection with them, but also sort of demonstrate your actual research on the company. Now let's sort of go through each one and essentially what you should be doing in each section. So when it comes to, let's start with the sort of company research part. So when you're coming to do company research for any sort of interview, I sort of bucket it into these what I call 7 areas. You don't have to do all 7 areas when it comes to the research about a company, but at least 3 of them. So let's quickly go through all 7 of them. So first thing is company strategy and vision. Now, what I mean by this? Well, essentially, when you come to apply for any sort of company, play for a role for any sort of company, you need to also understand is like what is this company's like sort of 3 year plan, 5 year plan? What are they trying to do? Where are they trying to go to? So that could be, for example, the company may be trying to leverage technology a lot more in their products or in their services. It could be they're looking to invest in AI. Their strategy could be trying to move into a new geographical market or maybe become more of a high-end company. So, really good example. Let's say you want to apply for Accenture. Their sort of key vision right now and strategy over the last 3 years, but for next 2 years for their 5 year plan, is being a market leader in AI and consulting. So they're investing 3 billion. The CEO mentioned 2 years ago they want to invest 3 billion over the next 5 years in their AI capabilities. As an example of you doing research on a company strategy and vision. Next one is really important financial performance. So I always try and say is how is that company performing financially? That's a really good indicator for why you might want to work there. So the company's growing quite fast year on year, seeing sort of double-digit growth. That's something you can point towards in your interview about why you want to work there that can really sort of stand out. Even better, especially for your banks, thing to sort of highlight is showing how are they doing in comparison to their competitors. So here's HSBC, right? So maybe you want to apply for HSBC's asset management division. You could probably look up there how much assets under management they may have in comparison to a NatWest or in comparison to a Barclays asset management and talk about how that can be going at a faster rate. Um, linked into that as well is sort of looking at I haven't put it there, but awards. So along with performances, awards, have they won any sort of recent awards when it comes to company the bank's performance? It could be around different areas. It could be around their commercial bank,
Mm.
retail bank, or corporate. But that's sort of the key thing I want to talk about there. Third thing, leadership changes. That's quite straightforward. So any sort of recent leadership changes, any sort of new CEO, COO, C-suite levels, but probably not really important. Size of the company really important as well. So if you're applying for a boutique or bulge bracket, know your reasons why you're applying for them. That's really important to sort of show why you want to work there. So if it's a boutique, you want to sort of focus more on like a flat hierarchical, flat structure. It's more sort of exposure early on, a lot more responsibility. Working in a big company like HSBC, really lean into the fact that you're working in a global company, working on large global complex projects for a global client base, and that variety and size in the work that you're doing. Culture and values quite straightforward. M&A activity can be potentially helpful. So looking at maybe have they bought another company recently and why it's beneficial for the company, and then lastly CSR. But if I have to sort of rank out all these four, company research is sort of what I would probably put in the top two for really important. Next one is star method. I won't spend much time on this one because I'm pretty sure most of you here understand the star method. What I want to sort of focus on here is sort of how do you go about actually preparing for your interviews. Now, people always say prepare star methods to answers, but how do you actually prepare for the right answers? So when it comes to your competencies, with your STAR method or your and you're preparing for those ones, what you need to do, and this is why I say AI is really good, is you want to be able to firstly pull out from the job description the sort of skills they're looking for. Maybe use AI to help you sort of pull out potential questions they can ask based off those skills. And then from there, build out STAR methods answers to those questions. And then at the bottom, I put there, create a bank of answers for standard questions that you can tailor to. So if you got a bank of 30 to 40 STAR answers that covers questions across leadership, teamwork, attention to detail, time management, organization, you'll get to a point where no matter what question you get asked, because you've got such a large bank of questions which cover different skills, you have answers you can sort of pull to and then maybe slightly tailor it towards a specific question you're being asked. But the key essentially is not just having a STAR method answer, but more importantly, is having a bank of answers. So for one type of skill, let's say organization, don't just have one answer, one question for it and one answer. Have three or four different types of questions for that one, which gives you that variety of answers to pick from when it comes to preparing for it. Now, the next part when it comes to it is CV storytelling. And this is a part where a lot of students usually do fall down because it's not quite easy to do. So what is CV storytelling? Essentially, it's just your ability to sort of tell a story about your career to date, and more importantly, being able to sort of pull out across your career to date or your story, sort of key nuggets and things that sort of show the company why they should hire you and why you're the best person for this role. So usually you'll get this in sort of around questions around why do tell me about yourself or walk me through your CV. When they're asking you these questions, what they're essentially trying to get out of from you, sort of understanding is like what have you done today? Who is this person and why and like what have you done that means that you are the best person for this role? So when it comes to sort of doing CV storytelling, here's how you actually go about it. So I was trying to say you start from your education and then work back chronologically. So anti-clockwise in regards to chronological order. So obviously start with a quick overview of your education, so who you are, so what you're currently studying, why you chose to study that, and what the sort of skills you're learning from that. So if you're applying, I don't know, for I'm gonna be quite standard here. Let's say you're studying economics, right? And you're applying for HSBC's corporate banking honors for their sales and trading program, right? Maybe you might say I'm a current second year economics student at the University of Birmingham. What really drew me to studying this course was the ability to be able to develop both strong numerical skills, which I've been able to hone through my quantitative economics module, but also strong analytical skills, which I'm able to develop through doing a lot of data analysis in my financial markets module. This has given me quite a strong skill set, which I believe is quite helpful for this role. So that's sort of really sort of clean to sort of start talking about your education. Then from there, what you then need to do is go through in order sort of the different experiences you have. So start talking through your different experiences that you've done from the earliest to your current one now. And then the key thing is that when you go through each experience, you're not essentially just summarizing what you've done, you're pulling out one or two key achievements you've done in each one that are relevant for the role. So let's say you've done a summer internship, you're going through a summer internship that you might have done. You rather than sort of summarizing that summer internship, what you should do is that during the summer internship, I was able to do X task, which led to Y outcome, really allowed me to sort of develop my analytical skills. Furthermore, during this internship, I was given the opportunity to lead X project where I was able to do ABC. Again, allow me to sort of refine X skill, which is relevant for the role you're looking to apply to. That's how you sort of bring your experiences and link it back to the role. Talk about sort of key achievements and stuff that you've done, and more importantly, the skills you were able to develop doing those stuff, and and make sure you're picking the skills that are transferable and relevant to the role you're looking to apply for. The key then at the end is that when you're going through different experiences, you want to sort of wrap it up at the end by saying, why is this role the natural next step in your career? And how do you do that? You do a complete summary of what you've spoken about before. So let's say you've gone through three different roles you've done. After that last role, the most recent role, what you'll say is, having now gone through these three different experiences where I've been able to develop and then name drop the skills you mentioned, I believe this role is quite well suited towards my current skill set, but more importantly, um my interest and my potential ability in regards to that could be you're quite numerical, you have quite strong analytical skills, and thus applying for sales and trading sort of aligns with that. So it's sort of like culminating what you've gone through and why this role now aligns with that. And because you're already picking up on skills throughout each one that are relevant for the role you're looking to apply for, it will naturally make sense when you sort of culminate it all and link it to this role. Um, Hopefully that was clear. If you do have any questions, I will try and make sure to look at the chat right now and try and see if there's anything there. Um, cool, nothing so far. So
So far, we can keep going, and then I will. Oh, there's a question in the chat now, actually.
cool.
I can answer this, but we can keep going with what's going on.
Okay, perfect, great. And now that sort of thing. And then the last part, so this is probably your part that's so underrated, but if done correctly, can really sort of help you stand out. And as someone who's done this myself quite multiple times for internship and graduate schemes, but also on the other side, now working in corporate, having supported with ACs and interviews, this part can really sort of help you stand out in comparison to a lot of other candidates. And that's asking questions. So usually at the end of an interview, you'll probably be asked, well, you definitely will be asked by interviewers that, do you have any questions for me? Or do you have any, do you think you want to sort of ask me? That's essentially a cue for you to essentially now take ownership of that interview and be able to sort of demonstrate to them that you've done your research in this company, and more importantly, demonstrate your actual passion and interest. So don't use this to essentially say no, I don't have any questions. Actually use time to sort of like stand out. And how do you sort of stand out? By asking thought-provoking questions. So I always sort of break your questions down into sort of two key buckets. Your sort of personal questions, that's questions that are directed towards the interviewer, and then company specific questions, that's interviews in regards to the company and the industry, etc. Right? So you want to have a mixture between those two questions. Ideally, like two each, is what I sort of say. Have four questions and two each. So when it comes to sort of personal questions, things you can sort of talk about and put it there is sort of ask them about their sort of career journey to date. So asking the interviewer about their career journey to date. So what made you choose HSBC? Or maybe choose this your the current department, or hopefully if they usually when the beginning of the interview, most interviewers do a quick introduction to who they are, and in that they might talk about how they might have worked elsewhere before ending up at HSBC. A question you should always try and ask is, why did you pick, or why did you move to HSBC, or why did you pick HSBC? Or if they've been there for their whole career, always ask them is like, what made you stay at HSBC across the last 10, 15 years? Those are really good questions because it sort of now creates a connection between you and the interviewer, and it makes it more of a conversation now, and it sort of drives emotional buy-in from the interviewer into the actual conversation because now they're talking about themselves, which is usually really quite helpful for actually creating a strong link with the interviewer.
That's
Um,
literally that's amazing. I think a question that's been put in the chat is there a problem with saying you don't know how to answer or asking to rephrase the question? How would someone go ahead with this kind of situation?
So I'm assuming your answer is like when they ask a question, you're not really sure. You don't basically don't have an answer to it. So I was trying to say is give yourself thinking time. So I would say, could you please repeat the question for me? That gives you time to think while they say it again. So that's probably what I would do. I think is just try and buy yourself thinking time in that moment. Um, and then hopefully with that thinking time, you're able to sort of formulate an answer. If it's a case you just don't actually have an answer to that question, then I think the ability to sort of think on the spot will be quite crucial here. Part of it, and it probably had to say that if you don't have an answer to it, then maybe a thing where you sort of just like highlight that we don't have an answer towards it. But I always try and say just think on the spot, like try and think of some sort of answer towards it. What I was trying to say is keep it simple. So even if you have to exaggerate, so usually with competency questions, you might be caught out by a competency question that they may ask you. I was trying to say if you can't think of something if you can't think of an actual example, try and think of an exaggerated one, but it's quite simple. So you're not sort of having to think too much in regards to answering it. But yeah, I would say it's just try and ask for them to repeat it and give yourself more thinking time.
It's really, really, really good. I think another question in the chat was, how do you approach the question, what's your biggest weakness? You don't want to obviously like downgrade yourself as not being the best candidate for the job, but you also want to be honest and also come across as human. How then would someone approach this situation?
Yeah, so I get good credits quite a lot. I think the key here essentially is to highlight, rather than saying highlight a weakness you have, highlight a weakness you had and sort of show how you actually addressed it and dealt with it. And then also make sure to pick a weakness that isn't actually integral to the role you're applying for. So usually, if you're applying for a role and you sort of know the sort of 4 to 5 key skills that are relevant for the role, try and pick a skill that isn't that relevant for the role. So, for example, if you're applying for a role that's around customer service or anything around sales, don't pick a weakness like poor communication skills because that's literally crucial for the role. Pick something like um maybe around can't think of one on the spot, but essentially a school that's just not crucial to the role you're applying for, because then it won't limit how they see you. And then the key here essentially is to pick a school that you essentially you might not have been strong in, and then what you just sort of show them is how you were able to address it. So did you have to? So let's say, for example, one of your key weaknesses was communication skills. Something you could say was that you, in order to work on your public speaking skills, what you did was that you started to invest in a public speaking training, or you started to self improve by listening to public speaking consultants, and then weekly you may have recorded yourself performing public speaking and listening back, and then essentially refining your approach, or creating some sort of program to actually improve, or maybe it's something around your modeling skills. Mention that you started a modeling course, started to do your own sort of develop your own sort of financial models, but starting from scratch and building your skill set up. Essentially, something around how you were able to improve that skill is what you want to sort of show them, because that shows them that you can identify skills, put out a plan to negate that skill, and then actually improve on it. So yeah, cool. So let's carry on. I think we'll come back to questions in a bit. But yeah, so with preparing questions, I sort of touched on the personal side. And then the other side, what you have is your sort of industry related or your company specific questions. So there's questions such as like I put there, how has X piece of news recently impacted the company? Or what is the company's vision in the next 5 years? So there's a sort of question I'd always try and ask him. So what I would do is do a bit of Google search on the company, what's happened in the industry, or what's been a recent piece of news that's happened around the company, and ask for the interviewer's view on it. That's a really good way of sort of showing you've actually researched the company, but more importantly, you want to sort of understand how the company's looking to pivot in the future or looking to move, and sort of showing more sort of bigger picture thinking when it comes to the company. But yeah, that's sort of like the sort of four key parts of it. Any sort of interview you may have, whether it's competency, motivational, one-to-ones, having a sort of bucket approach to it should help you cover all types of interview and put you in a good place. But let's not actually sort of break down and sort of touch on each individual part of the actual interview process. So first one is online assessment. So I was trying to say is that online assessments are probably the biggest cut-off point when it comes to the application process. It's probably the first type of interview process. So this is both higher views, but also your online assessments. Now, what I was trying to say is online assessments and interviews, it's essentially like past papers. Remember you're in A levels, right? Or GC, you're doing past papers, right? You're preparing for exams, right? They always make you do past papers. Why? Because it's basically to build a muscle of being able to be comfortable in that surroundings. When you actually go into the actual interview, no, in the actual exam, you've done 100 past papers. This is now just another past paper for you. There's the exact same approach you want to take to your online assessments. When you're online assessment, there is no sort of magic pill to sort of be able to succeed, right? There's no sort of like answers you can find online or some sort of like unique sort of like approach to preparing for them. A lot of them are sort of testing your logical reasoning, your numerical skills, your situational awareness. So there's no real way of like, you know, like an interview where you can sort of get interview prep tips and stuff like that. So how do you sort of succeed here? Practice, 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 practice. Practice is your best friend here. If you get to a point where you're going to any sort of online assessment that you've already done it before 4, 5, 6 times, you may get different questions each time, but you've done the actual process, so you're not really going to be afraid or be sort of put off by a new type of online assessment. And again, how can you sort of do those sort of things? There's places such as job test prep, there's assessment day, there's graduates first. These are really good for helping you prepare for your online assessments. They have all types of online assessments on there. And then when it comes to online interviews, I say Loom's your best friend. So what I always try and say to students is that with your online interviews, don't treat it any different you treat a normal interview. I think a key thing that sort of students struggle with is that because it's online and there's no other person on the other side, you sort of get like put off or you get sort of get freaked out. And it impacts you in terms of like the answers you give, the that's like the whole quality of the interview. What I was trying to say is treat it like you treat any sort of normal in-person interview. The only difference is that rather than having a person there to answer your questions, you're giving questions by the computer. So approach your interview prep in that same way. So that's preparing for competencies, that's preparing for motivational questions. I would say the prep part is probably 80% of it. The other 20% is sort of on the call. So that's sort of good eye contact with the camera, make sure you have good Wi-Fi, because one thing that can really impact you is the quality of the actual audio. If it's not clear your answers from the online interviews, or impact the ability for the company, or what a lot of companies now use is AI to actually pick up your audio and analyze your answers and sort of see who they're going to pick. So again, the other 20% is sort of like the more, I guess, the practical side in regards to it. But one thing that I did, and I recommend to all students to do who I work with, is use Loom. So if you guys don't know what Loom is, Loom essentially is like a allows you basically to record yourself, or allows you to basically record your laptop screen. So if you open Zoom and then just click on Loom, what you can then do is you can record yourself answering interview questions. And then after that, you can play back to yourself. What that does is allows you essentially to practice yourself, practice being in that sort of situation where you're answering questions to no one. So when you then get to the actual online interview, you've already practiced on Loom multiple times. You won't sort of feel freaked out from that, and you'll be quite comfortable in answering those questions. So make sure you tap into Loom, and Loom is free as well, so you don't have to pay for it. And it's quite a good tool to use when it comes to online interviews. But my sort of key takeaway here when it comes to online assessments and online interviews at higher view is practice, guys. The more you practice, the more comfortable you're going to be, the better the outcomes you're going to get. Cool. Perfect. So we looked on that one, but that's sort of like what I would say is like the pre in-person interviews. Now let's look at post like or more in-person interview types. So usually most interviews can kind of be kind of put into like three main buckets. So you get your sort of motivational and competency interviews. These are usually sort of like your first round interviews, right? When you got to the first round, this is what they'll focus on. Next type, sort of your technical interviews. This can also potentially be first round, depending on the company and on the industry you're applying for. But they can usually sort of be second round, potentially even final round interviews. And then assessment centers are usually what you call your final stage. So that's sort of like you get through to the AC. There's probably like the last remaining 30, 40 candidates. And this is a chance for essentially assess you in a controlled environment, in a group environment, and pick who they think is the best candidates. Now, like what essentially are they doing essentially at each stage? Let's all look at it. So at that sort of motivational competency type interview, essentially what they're doing there is just testing your actual interest in the role. They're testing your competencies and skills needed for the roles. And essentially you're going to understand essentially is, does this person actually want to work here? Does this person actually understand this company? Does this person have the relevant skills needed for this role? So I always try and say it's a part where you shouldn't have no reason not to do well in, because this is a part where it's all about your motivational questions, so your company research, and all about preparing for competencies. So this is a chance where for you to sort of really sort of shine out. So in this part, you want to sort of focus on demonstrating to the company, to that interviewer, you understand the company, you show why you actually want to work here, and you show how you have the relevant transferable skills they're looking for that role. For technical interviews, this is probably more for roles where there's a more technical element to it. So when I say technical, I mean there's a very specific hard skill needed. So think IB, financial modeling, and certain terminology to understand like DCFs, LBOs, or for consulting, it will be case studies, right? And understanding different sort of frameworks you use to attack shit. Or even software engineering, right? You have technical interviews in regards to different programming languages. You get certain tests you have to do with different programming languages. So that's quite important. So these aren't applicable to all roles. A lot of roles don't have technical interviews. You have your sort of first rounds and you go through to your ACs. Some of them do. I guess sort of key thing here is just testing your sort of technical knowledge for that specific role. What I say here is very similar to what for across all of them is start now. So one thing I always tell students, like if you want to get into IB, don't wait to get to an interview to start preparing for technicals. If you want to get into consulting, don't wait to get an interview to start doing case study prep. Same with software engineering. Start prepping now as if you're going to get an interview. So that when the interview does come, you're already ready. And you don't have sort of trying to cram it in 1 week how to basically build a DCF and 100 other types of questions you might get for technical interviews for IB. So really sort of start early and do little and often. Little and often is better for retaining information, but also it's less stressful for you as a student, where you've probably got 50 other applications gone live. Doing little and often just makes it a bit more bearable. And the last type of interview is usually your assessment centers. So usually at this point, I was trying to say is that you're probably just good enough for the role. So I think at this point, like, it's not testing whether or not you're actually good enough to do the role. This point is probably now more testing your sort of more soft skills, so your ability to work in a team through group interviews, or your sort of culture fit through the one-to-one interviews. Or maybe they might give you one or two tasks to complete to sort of just double check again. whether or not you have the right sort of technical and soft skills for the role. By this stage here, it's less about technicals and motivational, is more about culture fit and sort of showing off your soft skills. Um, so again, there's sort of the three types of interviews you're usually going to face when it comes to sort of getting past that initial application stage. Cool. So competency and motivational. So I was trying to say it's a very simple sort of structure and layout when it comes to navigating competency and motivational questions. Um, it literally is preparation and practice. And essentially, when it comes to especially competencies, the structure is very quite simple. I sort of put it here. So I would say is JD, job description, plus AI, plus practice leads to success. So what does that mean? Essentially, what you need to do is you use the job description as your Bible. When companies prepare competency questions, they're going to prepare competency questions on competencies that they're looking for in the role. And where can you find them? On the JD. The JD essentially is that company's one page to you saying, this is what we're looking for in the ideal candidate. Thus, therefore, it means that they're gonna ask you questions about those skills they're looking for in the ideal candidate. So what you should do is you see that JD, download it as a PDF, plug it into maybe like a chat GPT or Perplexity, whatever you use, and then you prompt it to essentially build out potential common questions they may ask you based on these key skills. And what I was trying to say is ask you sort of 4 to 5 different types of question per skill they ask you on the JD. After it pulls out those sort of different types of questions for you, you can then use the star method to build out answers towards those questions. And if you want to, you can even use ChatGPT to then refine your star answers after you have a first go. I was trying to say don't use ChatGPT to create the answers first. You write the answers out first because you actually know what you've done, and then ask it to refine it to make it more concise. That's the better way around it. And after that, it's all about practice. And then practice answering your questions. So point you're comfortable in knowing what you're going to say. Even record yourself. Or what I try and do sometimes, what I did at university is I had friends who were trying to get the same sort of fields. It would just be practice with them. So practicing with them, everyone has to go and answer the question, asking the question and answering it. It just makes things work a lot cleaner, and also you can get sort of feedback from them. And also it just replicates a real life actual interaction you have when you have a actual interview across you. But very, very simple process. It's I always say like it's simple, but it's not easy. So it's simple, like the process you do to build it out is quite simple. The hard part of that is a lot of questions you have to prepare for. So when I was at university now, sort of applying for my asset management, especially my sort of like IB interviews and ACs, technicals, I'd have like a 10-page long Word doc of like 60, 70, 70 questions. Now, not to sort of go that far, kind of if you want to, but it meant that I was just comfortable that most questions they asked me, I've got an answer in that I can sort of pull out that I probably really prepared for. But it's hard getting to a point where you have those sort of 50, 60 questions. Now, Diane didn't have to always use that approach. That's what I did. But this approach here is sort of like helpful. The hard part is just having to actually put out the answers and memorizing it. But yeah, that's actually what you need to do when it comes to sort of your competency and motivationals. Perfect. Great. So we'll carry on to see if there's any questions that we sort of get through the halfway part. So
Yeah,
Demi, are there any
actually, yeah, we can answer some questions actually. I'm just trying to send this message. Oopsies. Um, so yeah, 1 second. In the chat, there was a question. How would you explain a career break during an interview?
So I'm assuming you're saying that they're gonna ask you why you've had it, like what happened in this period. Um, but then so that one is, I think the question I even pick it back another step is that would they ask you that? So if on your CV, like you've got like a break, I don't know, it depends on how you've explained it on your CV. So it could be a thing, let's say I don't know, let's say you might have not been working for like 6 months um, and then you're applying for a role now, or let's use that example first. So you applied for a role, haven't worked for 6 months, and they ask you what you've done in the last 6 months. Firstly, they wouldn't really ask you that. I think they'll just kind of put two and two together to kind of tell that, well, you haven't worked in 6 months in your last role. You're probably just like looking for a job. I mean, if it's a career break, so like you didn't work for like a year, and you then went back to work, then give the reasons behind it. It probably is a reason behind it, right? So for most people, usually like it might have been illness. It could have been Um, it could have been in something in regards to, I know for a lot of people like might have children, they might take time out of work. Like, what's the reason behind your career break? So that would then be your answer. If it's that you just haven't been working, then that would be something that'll be quite apparent. And usually before that, when they sort of speak, we have that sort of initial HR interview, they'll sort of ask you those sort of questions up front in regards to your CV. So you shouldn't really get to an interview stage where they're now asking you about career breaks. That should have kind of been wrapped up beforehand. But if they do, just be honest. I think that's the best thing to do is just be honest about it. They still try to they still try to shortlist you despite having that career break. Therefore, they still obviously think you're a good candidate. So I would just be quite honest with them.
Really good. Another question would be, how do you do company research? I know we spoke about it, but how do you actually do it? Because a biggest worry people have is trying to say the same generic things that other people are going to say as well.
Yeah, but so if you use that approach I said, it shouldn't be generic. So like when it comes to company research, like 90% of people say that the company's this big, have these many offices, or your culture and values. Things I put there, I promise you, 90% of students won't do it. So that's 90% of students won't go into an annual report, look up their financial performance, and then compare it to like two other competitors. Most won't do that. 90% of students won't actually sort of go into the company's last few years, look at their M activity, look at who they've bought, and understand why they've bought them and how it impacts the company's trajectory. Most students won't sort of go um into the company strategy vision. Usually on an annual report, there's something called the CEO's letter, usually on the first few pages. Most students won't go into the annual letter, annual report, and pick out the company's CEO's annual letter and maybe name drop the sort of strategy or vision and the thing they're focusing on. So again, if you sort of follow these things here, like most students won't do this. So if you think you follow these sort of bullet points that I put here for types of things, you should be fine. So that's how I would sort of ask that is like just use this sort of bullet point structure. And annual reports literally has everything you need for interview prep on companies. Annual reports have their financial performance. Annual reports has the company's view on where they're going as a company, their strategy. Annual reports has everything in regards to their CSR, their sort of key values, has everything in regards to what they sort of see as their key risks. So most companies have a page around like what they sort of see as their key, they call it headwinds and tailwinds. So what they're sort of their key tailwinds, things that might impact them in the next few years, they have a page on that on their annual report. So I say you're both in this annual reports and then this sort of these bullet points and you should be fine.
Just to piggyback on that, like you have to do the work. You actually have to go and research. You actually have to go and find these information. You can't just expect it to just come to you, you know. So do the work, research, but also try as much as possible to do everything. Like Bolali said, like that in itself shows you've taken that resilience and that step to actually show that you're interested. That's really good. I think also in the interview, another question is what to say when they're asking about salary expectations.
So again, this is like I guess most people on this call like students and grads, right? Um, am I right in assuming that, Demi?
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
so like
students.
they're not gonna ask you that. Most companies have like set salaries for their grad schemes or internships, so they're not really gonna ask you about your salary expectations. But if, for example, a company does ask you that, just do a bit of market research. So that's literally Glassdoor. What I would just do is go onto Glassdoor. So before you even go into the interview, you should know how much this role pays anyway. So go onto Glassdoor. I would write in the salary, write in the role, find out what the salary range is for that role for that company, and then just pick a ballpark figure in the middle. So if you see on Glassdoor, they pay between 30 and 38K. I would say between like 33 to 36, something like that. Or if you feel like you're not, and again, it depends on your level of experience. If you feel like you're like not experienced or you're like an entry level role, maybe go a bit lower so you're not pricing yourself out. So you might go 32K. But like 9 times out of 10, for most of entry level roles, there isn't like a salary. They won't ask you that sort of question because they probably have a set salary for the grad scheme anyway. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, amazing. We can carry on now.
perfect, great. So Cool. So we've looked through competency and motivational. Next up is technicals. So the second of the three one to look at is technicals. So again, the key thing here I was trying to say is practice, practice, practice. But more importantly, what I mean by that. So first you start now. Always trying to say is starting now is really important. I mentioned it earlier on, but honestly, having been through this before and done multiple career coaching things for students, is that it's so hard to try and prepare for technicals between the time you get the notification for an interview and the interview date. Usually, you might get maximum a week or two before your actual interview date. And I mean, you could, as if you sort of put everything down and focus on 2 weeks on that, you could, but usually you might have lectures or you have other roles you're applying for. So I was trying to say start now, do little and often, and basically prepare now as if you're going to get an interview. So by October or by November, when you're now in sort of like most companies have been like the interview stages, you've really got 2 months worth of resources of interview prep to sort of get you in a good place for technicals. Furthermore, what I'd say as well is leverage online resources. So for different types of roles, there are different resources out there. So for banking, anything IB, S&T, so sales and trading, there's Wall Street Prep, there's Wall Street Oasis, there's what else is there out there? There's a few others. So Kaplan have a few resources, leverage them. So we've actually got a lot of them already on our site. So someone from our team who no longer on our team now, but was part of our team, used to work in investment banking, and they had all the resources that they gave them for prep. So they've got it all on our site, and it's free to download. But then for consulting, again, leverage online resources. So the best two ones there are like job test prep, case coach, that helps with case studies. Software engineering is leak code. What I think we need to do is like find out what are the best resources that I need online to prepare. And what I think nowadays is that honestly, in today's world, there's no excuse not to be able to do technical prep because there's a plethora of stuff out there, whether it's YouTube videos to help you or it's online resources. There's a tons of resources out there to help you technical interviews. So what I was trying to say is leverage them, and then with that, practice. So actually practice running through those interviews. What a lot of students do is that they'll do the theory, so they'll learn. Let's say you want to apply for IB, right? You got an interview. They'll learn how to do a DCF or they'll learn how to do an LBO, but they would actually then practice answering it. So actually practice someone running it through to another individual. It's kind of like there's one thing reading something and knowing it yourself, and another being able to articulate it. Because the key part when it comes to technical interviews is not just knowing it, it's how can you articulate your technical knowledge. Because to the interviewer, they didn't know you. So if you knew how to do a DCF, but you're not able to articulate it well, to them, they'll just think you don't know how to do a DCF. So being able to articulate it comes through practice and doing mock interviews, mock technicals, whether it's mock case studies, or mock leak codes, or mock IB technical preps, like just practicing them lets you actually improve your ability to actually communicate your answers when it comes to technical interviews. And as I said before, we got a lot of resources. So we actually went live in August, but we've actually now done a new update which goes live tomorrow. So actually, this is quite a good timing. So we've got a lot of resources. Again, they're all free for you to use and help you out with that. But yeah, technical interviews is again as Demi said before, you've got to do the work. So like I always say, these things they're quite simple. They're just not easy. So all these sort of things together should put you in a good spot. So what we're end of September now. If you're applying for consulting roles, guys, start doing case study prep now. If you're looking to get into sort of banking like sales and trading or IB, start doing your prep now. Even if you haven't got an interview, start now. So that you're in a position where when you do get an interview, you then not having to sort of rush. Perfect, great. Now we looked at sort of competency motivational. Now looked at technical. I guess the last sort of key one here is assessment centers. Now this is usually the last stage of the process, and I always try and say when you get to this process, it means you're good enough. Like when you get to when you're there, it means that the company thinks you're good enough to do this job. This is not a case of trying to prove to them that you can do this role. It's a case of proving to them that you're a good fit for them, and you have the relevant soft skills they need. So most ACs, so I call them ACs, usually fit across have or usually incorporate these sort of three exercises. Some might have more, some might have just these three, but it will always have these three. So first is we'll have a group exercise. There's usually some sort of group exercise might be having to do a certain presentation together or complete a task together in a group. But that's one. Second one is one-to-one interview. So you'll most always have a one-to-one interview with an employee. And then lastly, some sort of task-based thing to do. So across the ACE, you might give you a task to do. You might have to read a certain case study and conclusions, or do some sort of online Excel task or something. But a task will be given. Now, cool. How do you sort of approach this? So I say, firstly, high level, when they assess you, they're going to assess you across a combination of these three or whatever additional exercise they give you. So what I always say is, even if you don't do well in one, don't fret too much. Don't let it overall. You don't let it sort of like kill your flow. Focus on the other two. Focus on the other three things you may have. Because if you might not do well in one, if you ace the other three, you should be all right. However, what I would say is not all tasks aren't equal in weighting. So the two most important tasks are always going to be group exercise and one-to-one interview. Um, Especially in my eyes, what I always say is that group exercise is really, really important because that's the area where every assessor will be in the room interviewing, looking at you. When it comes to one-to-one interviews, only one assessor looking at you. Um, so you usually, if you do quite well there, you've only got one person back you up. But if you do really well in the group exercise, you got like 5 or 6 assessors there. They can all agree on you being a good candidate. So I was trying to say is make sure you really try and ace that group exercise. Also, make sure you ace all of it, but then ace the one-to-one interview and then the task. Now, how do you sort of approach group exercise? I feel like people have had so much knowledge out there on how you sort of ace them. That I'm not gonna go through like the sort of generic stuff. I'm gonna go through what I think works quite well, and how you do it. So I think the key thing first is making a great first impression. So by that, what I mean is that you don't want to be a passenger when it comes to your group exercise. So usually you get given a task, you might have like 5 minutes reading time, and then 20 minutes to discuss. So all I try and show is make sure that you actually add value to that conversation. So it's making sure you're actually giving ideas. And that means you could be one of the first few people to speak. That doesn't mean you're controlling the conversation, but actually be that try and get across. Because what I was trying to say usually is that when you do these, like when it's time to discuss, people usually have the same sort of points. So if you can get the point across first, it will look good. That's the first thing. Secondly, be friendly with others. So what they're really sort of testing here is your ability to be able to communicate with others, work in a team, and manage different personalities. So one thing I always try and say is be friendly. Um, don't try to dominate conversations. Don't talk over people. I mean, that looks really, really bad is when someone's talking and then you just start to talk over them. Like it has such a bad impression on assessors. And I've been told that directly from recruiters when it comes to reviewing this is that people who do talk over this doesn't look good. So let people actually finish what they're saying. And then also really important is just don't listen to them speak. Listen to actually taking what they say, and then maybe even respond to what last person said, because they can tell again when someone's just like waiting to speak rather than actually trying to engage in a conversation or discussion within a team. Thirdly, bring others into the conversation. And this is controversial. So a lot of companies don't necessarily like how most people do it. What most people do, they'll see someone who's quiet and say, "Hey X, what's your view?" That's sort of like putting the person on the spot. That's putting the person to do that. What I was trying to say is, rather than trying to, let's say like you want to make sure that everyone gets their view. Let's say someone has spoken once, right, and haven't spoken again. What you may do is that actually, so let's say you had your time to speak. You say, I actually want to revert back to X's initial point in regards to ABC. I think just to add to that, something we can really highlight there is you could also maybe do this as well. Now that's a very easy way to bring others into the conversation because that person hasn't spoken in a while. But you've now, rather than try and catch them out by saying, "How have you got something to say?" You're actually basically bringing their point up again, validating it, adding your 2 pence, and now giving them a chance to sort of like now touch again on the conversation because that was their point. That's a really good way of sort of bringing others into the conversation, naturally. And then lastly, communicate with intent. So don't waffle. Don't talk for the sake of talking. Like, don't just like, yes, you want to get your point across, but it's a balance between getting your point across and then just talking so you can, just so your voice can be heard. Because you want to make sure you're adding actual value to conversations, because they're actually going to be assessing the actual value you bring to the conversation. So for time's sake, I'm going to try and get through these last two quite quickly. So one-to-one interview. So again, here, this is more of a culture fit interview. So again, people have a lot of advice around this. I want to focus on the last three. So make a conversation. So important. I remember for one of my grad schemes that I got, which is I think it was at Aon, for their broker role, like one of my so I asked for feedback. One of my feedback was in regards to how easy I was to sort of talk to as a person. I remember that interview quite well, where we spent so much time just talking less about the actual job, more about me as a person. So they had my CV up in front of them. They were all just talking from my different experiences, but also my extracurriculars. So playing rugby, also talking about being involved at my own sort of blog page, FF Perspectives, which it initially was. But I made it more of a conversation. But then also I made sure to ask questions. So after they introduced themselves, I didn't wait till the end to ask questions. I asked her a question off the back of what she said initially, which meant that we actually spent the first 10 minutes sort of talking about her rather than talking about me. But they like that because it's now more of a conversation. They in their head, they're looking at me thinking like, "Right, this is someone I can actually work with." Because something called the airport test that a lot of companies use when it comes to that their culture fit. Essentially, is that if I was stuck in an airport with this person for 9 hours, could I survive? Essentially, the idea is like, could they see themselves working with you or sitting next to you for 9 hours a day? And a big part of that essentially is how you're able to hold a conversation. So more often than not, what I was trying to say really important here is that ability to actually have a conversation with them. And the key way of doing that is through asking questions. Um, Lastly, be memorable. So like, and this is why I say charisma is really important. And I guess if you're not naturally charismatic or not naturally quite a outspoken person, like what I always try and say to yourself, and this might sound quite radical, but just pretend that you are. You kind of have to force yourself into it because at the end of the day, right, you're got to this stage right now. You need to, especially when you sort of get into actual role, you need to be able to be quite comfortable in being around people and holding conversations. So like if you have to sort of like pretend or force your way into sort of being charismatic, do so. Having that's cool. That's basically having strong body language. That's actually being able to hold that conversation and actually being able to make it a chat rather than sort of a Q&A. Because people can feel tension in the air when it comes to interviews. You want to sort of break down that tension straight away by making a conversation. Then you're both more relaxed. It's easier. You get through it. And then lastly, task. It's a bit hard because each company, a task could be anything, right? There, I don't know what it could be, so it's quite hard here. So to sort of help you guys with this task, but usually they aren't going to be hard tasks they give you. I guess the sort of key thing here is that make sure you actually answer what they're looking for. It'd be quite easy to actually answer what you think they want, answer the question, and also then make it fancy. Like in the past, like I've seen, especially when I worked at Cognosis, we had a task that everyone had to do for the that's a strategy consulting company, a task that everyone had to do for the ACs, right? In regards, had a little case study, they had to basically give us some sort of like recommendations on how they can deal with it. I literally remember said that when they're reviewing it, they're not looking for fancy answers. They want sort of straightforward, very simple answers because in reality, when it comes to working in strategy consulting, clients don't want fancy solutions. They want sort of very simple solutions to sort of fix. So keep it simple, break it down to smaller chunks as well when you're doing it, so you're not sort of overwhelmed. But yeah, this part, just make sure you just get it done. You don't need to sort of stand out here. It's more of a tick box exercise. Focus on the first two of group exercise and one interview, and you should be good. Um, but yeah, cool, perfect. So I'm not gonna spend too much time on this, but because we will sort of run out of time. But let's sort of wrap up these last two parts is common pitfalls. So I always call things that there's a lot of intangibles when it comes to interviews, and intangibles are essentially things that you can't necessarily see or prepare for, but are sort of like affect the actual flow of it. So here are a few of them right here. I won't go through into all of them, they're quite straightforward. Um, but one thing I want to sort of highlight here is sort of like the questions part. I always say questions are such a really good way of like making an interview so much more relaxed because it makes it less of a Q&A, them answering you, them questioning you, and you answering into more of a conversation because now they're having to answer questions themselves, which makes it a lot less sort of teacher student vibe and more sort of colleague to colleague vibe. But here's sort of a few pitfalls that I say are quite important. Um, Intangibles as well, a few more things as well you can sort of look at. Again, I won't go through all of them. I might pick up the most important one here. And that essentially is, in my eyes, personally, is I said before, turn it into a conversation, not an interrogation. If there's one thing you guys should take away from this is that interviews are a conversation, it's not an interrogation. But yeah, and last thing is commercial awareness. So we're running out of time, so I won't spend too much time on this. Essentially, guys, my takeaway for you here, guys, is commercial awareness is a muscle. Like when you go to the gym, right? You want to get muscles, right? You don't go to the gym once and suddenly get muscles. You have to go 3, 4 months in a row, consistently daily to sort of grow the muscle. Same thing when it comes to commercial awareness. You can't develop commercial awareness in a day. You have to sort of do a little one often. So when it comes to commercial awareness, there's sort of two approaches, right? There's company first and industry first approach. Company first approach, essentially looking at the company and essentially analyzing those sort of four things there. And when you sort of know what these four things are for each company, so what the company does, who their clients are, where they operate, how they make their money, you then go and do look at the news and understand how does the news impact those four areas. Other ways, the flip side. So I would look at the company, which is sort of like that ground up. You can do top down analysis. So that's looking at the industry, I'm looking at what are sort of the key trends in the industry and looking at how those trends impact the company. That can be trends such as like AI as a trend, or another trend could be things in regards to demographic change, or it could be inflation or interest rates. Those are what you look at trends, and then you look at how those trends impact the company. But that essentially wraps up essentially everything. So I know I kind of run through that last sort of part there, guys. But these slides will be available for you. Demi will give them to you. So I'm happy to sort of share that. I sort of had Q&A, but to sort of wrap up quickly. So hope that was helpful for you guys. A few things about us. So what you can do is you want to sort of find out more information in regards to our weekly career advice, all our sort of resources and opportunity and events. We do a lot of these workshops. You can join the community there. That's out of date. So now we're currently at seeing like 4,000 students. So you can join a lot of the students in that community where you can essentially be able to get access to all our sort of resources, all our sort of advice that we try and give weekly and events, and then WhatsApp as well. We've got a little community on WhatsApp as well. I think roughly around 450 people on that. Again, 99% of students and graduates are in your position. Where again, we sort of give advice. You can ask questions on there. We try and respond quite quickly. And everything. Cool, great. Demi, I think
Thanks. Thank you so much for that, Agolade. And also, guys, we also put our community in the chat as well. You can, like Agolade said, join FO Perspective, join Beyond Education's communities. The more you are around students and graduates your age and you're able to share and talk about this, the easier it will become for all of you guys to gain these opportunities and be better at interviews. Just to also let you know that if you are applying to the HSBC, please, the applications in London are very, very, very competitive. So please, any opportunities outside of London, I would personally say grab it. If it's something you're interested in, relationship management, business development, and if you were part of the in-person events, you would know that the Birmingham office and the Birmingham roles are also quite inclusive as well, and also will get you to the position you need to get. So please, London is very competitive and very hot. So if you want to make sure that you're maximizing every opportunity that you get, I would definitely say apply to those opportunities outside of London to make sure that you're maximizing your position, your chances. Your CV is probably most likely to be seen more outside there. So please apply for outside London. I've put in the links for the community, put the links for the Discord, and also for the HSBC applications. And also, you can email Agolade on LinkedIn, email, TikTok, contact him to be able to. He also offers one-to-one career support as well, CV support as well. So you can always maximize that as well. And thank you so much to everyone for joining tonight. I know it's 2 minutes past our initial end time, but thank you so much for joining in. And if you do need anything, you can always reach out to any one of us, and that would be amazing. And yeah, thank you so much. We wish you all the good luck in this application season. And we hope to see a lot more of you soon on the other side with your corporate jobs. Have a wonderful evening, guys, and see you next time. Bye.
perfect. Bye everyone.